The sound is called stridor. It's a high-pitched, tearing noise produced by turbulent airflow through a narrowed airway. I learned the term in my second year of medical school. I never thought I would hear it in my own daughter's throat. Her chest rises, a fractional movement under the thin thermal blanket. A cause. It falls, a soft rattle of failing tissue, an effect. The monitor beside her bed traces the peaks and valleys of her oxygen saturation, a failing mountain range I can't climb. SpO2, 89%, too low. The machine chimes its insistent disapproval, a sound that has become the soundtrack to my life. I am a biological machine whose sole purpose has been distilled down to the preservation of my child. Every colonist on Portent 5 sees Dr. Anselm Kirk, a pillar of stoicism holding up our threadbare utopia. They don't see the man underneath, the father moving with the heavy gait of a man carrying an invisible, crushing weight. They don't know that every ration counted, every minor injury I treat is filtered through a single agonizing question. Will Paloma live to see the next supply rotation? She's 9 years old, a child of the red dust. Her illness is a signature of this world, a slow, quiet killer born from a mineral deficiency in the water table we didn't foresee. Exodeficiency syndrome. It sounds clean, clinical. It is not. It is watching your daughter dissolve from the inside out. My wife Britta still reads her stories of Earth, of blue skies and green grass, myths from a world Paloma has never seen. Britta is the keeper of our hope. I am the keeper of the terrifying facts. The call came 10 minutes ago. Proximity alert. The FTL supply ship, the Messenger, was disengaging its fold drive at the system's edge. It wasn't a moment of relief. It was the starting pistol for the final desperate sprint of my life. The Cure, a targeted xenobiotic neutralizer synthesized on Earth and ferried across the stars, was on that ship. The equation was simple. Sickness is a cause. Medicine is the effect. I met him in the main concourse, just past the docking ring. Captain Ephraim Locke. He was not what I expected. There was no swagger of a starship captain, no weariness of a long-haul pilot. He possessed a terrifying stillness, the posture of a man who had found a deep and unsettling peace. His eyes were the only sign that something was wrong. They were perpetually unfocused, looking through me, through the dented composite walls of the colony, as if they were made of glass. "Captain Locke," I said, my voice flatter than I intended. "I'm Dr. Anselm Kirk. Welcome to Perseverance Point." He smiled, a serene, beatific expression that didn't touch his eyes. "A fascinating choice of name for a place such as this," he said, his tone patient, condescending, as if speaking to a clever child describing a dream. "My mind has a flair for the dramatic, it seems." I felt a cold prickle of confusion. I held out a datapad. "This is the medical manifest I need you to authorize. Priority 1 is a case of advanced exodeficiency, my daughter." He didn't take the pad. He just kept looking through me. "Your daughter," he repeated, tasting the words. "Tell me about her. What role does she play?" The question was so bizarre, so outside any framework of normal human interaction, that I could only stare. "Role? She's sick. She's dying. The neutralizer on your ship is the only thing that can save her." "Save her," Locke mused. "You believe her to be real then? This daughter. You feel a genuine attachment to her suffering." He nodded slowly, a scholar confirming a hypothesis. "Yes. My subconscious would craft a powerful emotional anchor, a child in peril, a perfect engine of pity designed to keep me tethered to the dream. My professionalism, the thin armor I wore every day, cracked." "What are you talking about? Dream?" "Captain, I don't have time for philosophy. A child's life is on the line." "Whose child?" he asked, his voice a maddeningly reasonable whisper. "Anselm Kirk is a figment, a projection of my own lingering sense of duty. His daughter Paloma is the personification of a hope I must abandon. This place, this colony, it is a failsafe. A beautiful, complex hallucination our minds have constructed to shield us from the truth. He leaned closer, and I could smell a strange, metallic scent on his uniform, like superheated wire. The truth, Doctor, is that the ship never arrived. We are still lost. Adrift in the scar between worlds, in the chaotic non-reality of the fold. This, he gestured to the concourse, to the worried faces of colonists peering from doorways, is a shared dream we are having while we drown. Your suffering, your daughter's suffering, is not real. It is a lure. And to give you the medicine would be to strengthen the illusion, to damn my crew to this prison forever. It was then I understood. This wasn't a man I could reason with. I was not fighting bureaucracy. I was fighting a destructive faith. The ship carried a sickness far worse than the one killing my daughter. Solipsism syndrome, a rare catastrophic psychological break triggered by FTL travel. I had read the suppressed corporate papers on it. I never thought I would see it. As I turned to leave, my datapad slipped from my numb fingers. It clattered to the floor and rolled a few inches back toward me. Uphill. I stared at it, the physics of the moment feeling slick. My own exhaustion, I told myself. Acute stress. Nearby, one of Locke's crewmen, a young man with the same vacant, peaceful expression as his captain, turned his head. I saw his reflection in the armoured plexi of the overlook window, the single vast pane that looked out on the red rock formations we called the Needles. For a fraction of a second, the reflection's head turned just after the man himself. A lag, a visual stutter in the code of the world. I backed away from them, from the calm madmen and the broken physics they trailed behind them. I fled to the infirmary, the one place that was supposed to make sense, a kingdom of science and fact. I stood over Paloma's bed. The rasp of her breath seemed deeper now, rougher. I checked the monitor. SpO2, 87%, 2 points lower than when I'd left. It was impossible. Her decline was slow, predictable. This was an acceleration, a sudden, terrifying dip. It hit me then, a realization so sharp, it felt like a shard of ice in my gut. It had started the moment they arrived. Their presence, their belief, their deep, philosophical certainty that my daughter wasn't real was somehow, impossibly, making it true. Their disbelief was a tangible, lethal force. The cause wasn't just the deficiency in her blood anymore. The cause was them. The physician in me, the part that still clung to a world governed by observable, repeatable phenomena, demanded proof. A hypothesis is not a fact. My terror was not data. I spent the next 2 hours locked in my office, a small, cluttered space adjacent to the infirmary. I pulled the colony's internal proximity logs, a simple system that tracks the movement of personnel through their embedded comm chips. I cross-referenced the timestamps with Paloma's continuous vital sign feed. The result was a perfect, horrifying correlation. A clean line on a graph, as elegant and damning as a signature on a confession. At 14:03, Captain Locke and his bridge crew moved down the main concourse toward the overlook. At that same minute, Paloma's blood oxygen saturation dipped 3 points. At 14:17, they returned to the docking ring. Her levels stabilized but did not recover. Every time a member of the messenger's crew passed near the infirmary wing, a corresponding tremor ran through my daughter's biology. Every time they drew away, the bleeding stopped. It was a wound that opened and closed with their proximity. Their disbelief was a form of radiation, and my daughter was absorbing a lethal dose. My first thought wasn't violence, it was triage. If I could just pull one of them free from the collective delusion, find one mind I could anchor back to this reality, maybe it would be enough. Maybe I could break the circuit of their shared psychosis. I scanned the crew manifest. My eyes settled on a name. Crewman Nash, age 22, first FTL tour. He was young, impressionable. He lacked the hardened intellectual defenses of a man like Locke. He was my best chance. I found him in the hydroponics bay, the one place in the colony that didn't feel like a tomb. It was Britta's domain, a zone of vibrant green under the harsh, full-spectrum glow of the agro lamps. Nash was standing before a row of leafy kale, looking at it with the same detached curiosity he might give a museum exhibit. "Crewman Nash." He turned, his face a mask of placid calm. "Doctor, I was just admiring this. The detail is remarkable. My subconscious has a real talent for botany." I held up my datapad. I had recorded a 30-second clip of Paloma, her struggle for breath, the blue tinge to her lips. Cyanosis, a word that felt like a curse, the raw tearing sound of the stridor. I didn't say anything. I just let him watch. I needed to see a hint of empathy, of horror, some basic human response. He watched it intently, his head tilted. When it was over, he looked at me, and his eyes were filled with a serene, almost complimentary light. "My mind did a very good job on her," he said, his voice filled with admiration. "The suffering feels so authentic. The sound design, the subtle discoloration of the skin. It's a masterpiece of verisimilitude, a truly convincing anchor." I felt something break inside me. It was a quiet, clean snap. The death of a hope I didn't know I was still holding. I was trying to reason with a placid lake, trying to show a photograph of a house fire to the man holding the match, only to have him praise the quality of the image. "She is real," I whispered, the words feeling useless, like throwing pebbles at a fortress wall. Nash gave me a gentle, pitying smile. "Of course she feels real to you. That's your function. You are the embodiment of my lingering pity. You have to believe she's real, otherwise the dream loses its power." He turned back to the kale. My fists were clenched so tight my knuckles ached. This wasn't a mind I could save. It was a soul that didn't believe it was lost. I left the hydroponics bay, the image of his placid smile burning behind my eyes. Back in the main corridor, I saw a colonist spill a cup of water. The brown liquid splashed toward the floor, but halfway down, the droplets hung suspended in the air. They glittered for a full second, a constellation of tiny, frozen spheres, before collapsing into a puddle. The colonist scrambled away, but I just stood there, watching the puddle spread across the metal deck. It was a symptom, another tear in the fabric. To Locke, this wouldn't be a terrifying anomaly. It would be scripture, a sign that the world was unwriting itself. He wouldn't be hiding from this. He would be holding court, interpreting the miracles. And there was only one pulpit in this colony big enough for a prophet of the void. I knew where he would be. The Overlook. It was the colony's despair window, a place to stare into the vast, hostile emptiness and feel the weight of our isolation. Now, it was his pulpit. I found him there, his crew gathered around him like disciples. He was speaking, his voice calm and eloquent, carrying easily in the cavernous space. "The dream is fraying," he said, gesturing to the red desolation outside the window. "Our awakening is causing it to become unstable. You feel it, the inconsistencies, the glitches in the code. This is a good thing. It means we are winning." His eyes swept over his crew, then seemed to fix on something in the distance, in the direction of the infirmary. "But the dream's core is powerful. It has created a focal point for our sentimentality. An anchor, a sick child designed to chain us here with pity. The Figment Doctor's daughter, her name, the dream tells us, is Paloma. He was using my daughter's name. He was weaving her into his sermon of unreality. Her fading is the key," Locke continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "When we allow her to fade, when we deny her reality so completely that her narrative ends, the anchor will be gone. The dream will collapse, and we will awaken together back on our ship in the truth of the void. Her death is our liberation." As he said the word, liberation, a deep groan traveled through the deck plates. I looked up. A massive beam, A core structural support for the concourse ceiling was rippling. The solid metal flowed like cloth in a breeze. Flakes of red dust sifted down. A woman screamed. Panic erupted. Colonists scrambled back in terror. Ephraim Locke did not flinch. He slowly raised a hand, pointing at the warping beam, a beatific smile spreading across his face. "You see," he said, his voice filled with a holy ecstasy. "We are waking up." I stood there, hidden in the shadows of a side corridor, and the last piece of my old self fell away. The physician was dead. His tools, logic, empathy, evidence, were useless against this plague of the mind. These people weren't just a threat to my daughter. They were a threat to the world itself. They were a death cult, and their prophet was actively trying to unwrite reality, starting with my daughter. The grim equation in my head had found its final, terrible variable. Cause, a destructive faith that physical reality was a lie. Effect, I would have to provide a response so real, so physical, that it could not be mistaken for a dream. I would have to take the medicine by force. But even a desperate man clings to his nature. The physician in me, battered and dying, made one last stand. I wouldn't start with violence. I would start with a lie, a clinical deception. I retreated to my office and keyed the colony-wide comms, routing a priority channel to the messenger's internal frequency. Code Blue, Infirmary 3, cardiac arrest, assistance required. It was a shot in the dark, a plea aimed at whatever residual training might be buried beneath the syndrome's fog. I named a specific crew medic from their manifest, hoping to isolate him, to get him alone, away from Locke's corrupting influence. There was no response. Through the security feed, I saw the crewman in question standing in a corridor near the docking ring. He heard the call. A small indicator light on his wrist comm flashed. He didn't move. He simply tilted his head, a curious smile on his lips as if listening to an interesting piece of fiction being piped into his ear. The lie had failed. The physician sighed and died. Rage, pure and primal, took his place. I left the infirmary and stalked down the main corridor. I found the medic, the one who had ignored my call, still standing in the same spot, watching a section of the wall where the metal seemed to sweat beads of mercury. I grabbed his arm. The flesh felt real enough. "You got my call," I snarled. "A man is dying." Another lie, but this one was edged with teeth. He turned to look at me, his eyes unfocused. "The narrative is becoming quite frantic," he observed pleasantly. "The stakes are heightening. A sign of the third act, perhaps." I shook him, my fingers digging into his biceps. "This isn't a story. My daughter—" He pulled his arm away with a sudden violent agitation. He gesticulated wildly, his hands flying. "She is the MacGuffin, the plot device, the thing my psyche thinks it needs to save." As his right hand sliced through the air, it glitched. For a single stuttering frame of reality, his fingers smeared, merging into a single indistinct paddle of flesh, the knuckles and joints gone, like a low-resolution image failing to load. Then it snapped back into a perfect five-fingered hand. Paralysis locked my joints. My training screamed impossible, but my eyes screamed fact. The crewman stopped, his agitation gone as quickly as it had appeared. He looked down at his own hand, resting on the console beside him. He examined it with a profound philosophical curiosity, as if it were a strange piece of alien fauna. "What do you suppose my mind intends with this?" he asked me, his voice full of genuine wonder. He wasn't terrified. He wasn't even aware that his body had just betrayed the fundamental laws of biology. He was a sculptor who had forgotten the shape of his own clay. A harsh voice cut through the air. "Anselm, stop. This is over." Stellan Steiner, the colony's security chief, stood 20 feet away, flanked by two of his officers. He was a man made of the same hard, unforgiving material as the rest of this rock. I knew he was a father too, but his love was for the colony as a whole, a sprawling, dysfunctional family of 200 souls. "The structural failures are accelerating," Steiner said. The concourse beam is still unstable. Half the hab is in a panic. This ends now. I need the medicine, Stellan, I pleaded. It's the only... No! He cut me off. He pointed a thumb back toward the docking ring. They go back to their ship. We lock the door. We seal the airlock. We survive. That is the only priority. You'll be killing my daughter. Her life is one life, he shot back. The math wasn't emotional for him. It was simple, brutal arithmetic. Her life against the integrity of this entire habitat? Against every other man, woman, and child here? The math isn't hard, Anselm. You're a doctor. Do it. It was an ultimatum. Stand with the colony and watch Paloma die or be treated as part of the problem. He saw my obsession as a liability, a fire that threatened to burn down the whole house. Stand down, Doctor, he ordered, or I swear to you, I will have my men sedate you and lock you in your own infirmary until this is done. I stared at him, and I saw no way through. He was another wall, a sane one, which made him infinitely more dangerous. I gave a slow, defeated nod and turned away, letting him think he had won. I retreated to my sanctuary, my prison, the infirmary. She was paler now. The shallow, tearing sound of her breathing was the only reality that mattered. Steiner's choice was logical. The colony's survival over one sick child. But a father's love isn't logical. It is a singularity. It bends all other laws around it. My eyes swept over the room. For the first time, I didn't see instruments of healing. I saw tools, a heavy steel oxygen canister, a tray of scalpels, a meter-long length of reinforced polymer tubing from a dialysis machine. My hands, a healer's hands, began to move. I picked up a roll of industrial-grade filament tape. My eyes fell upon a bone saw, its serrated teeth designed for amputation, its weight solid and balanced in my palm. The physician was gone, leaving only the father. And the father was no longer looking for a cure. He was planning a war. The bone saw felt alien in my hand, its purpose perverted. Before I could commit fully to this new, monstrous identity, I felt a duty to the old one. I had one last patient to see. Lars Steiner, Stellan's father, was a ghost haunting a bed at the far end of the ward. A man from the first wave, his body was a roadmap of portent failures, lungs lined with red dust, bones leached of their earthly strength. He was dying in the slow, grinding way of the pioneers who had outlived their optimism. But his mind was still a razor. I approached his bed, my motions stiff with a healer's ingrained habit. Lars, how are you feeling? His sunken eyes, clear and fiercely intelligent, found mine. They didn't see a doctor. They saw a man with a sharp-toothed tool partially hidden behind his back. He knew. I'm feeling like a man whose son is about to make a hard choice and who's looking at another father about to make an impossible one, he said. He glanced toward Paloma's partitioned corner of the ward. My boy. He sees the whole colony, the systems, the structures. He sees the future. He coughed, a dry, painful sound. I automatically reached for a cup of water. He waved it away. You, he said. You only see her. That's the difference. On this rock, you can save the future, or you can save the people living now. You can't do both. My boy chose the future. You're choosing your own. The words were not a judgment. They were a statement of fact, as unadorned and brutal as the landscape outside. In that moment, he wasn't just absolving me of my guilt toward the colony. He was telling me that every choice here was monstrous in its own way. Mine was just more personal. As he spoke, something happened. The medical monitor above his bed, a solid block of metal and composite, began to sag. Its corners drooped like melting wax, the numbers on its screen stretching and distorting. A groaning vibration ran through the floor. The colony's reality was becoming as sick as its people. I left Lars's side without another word. The time for deliberation was over. The world was coming apart. I saw Britta on my way out of the infirmary. She was standing by the main hatch, her arms wrapped around herself, her face pale. She didn't need to see the saw. She saw the new, hard emptiness in my face. She saw the man I was becoming. Her eyes were wide with a terror that wasn't for our daughter's illness, but for her husband's soul. She didn't speak, didn't try to stop me. She just watched. I slipped out a side maintenance hatch. The service tunnels were a maze of conduits and pressure pipes. I knew these tunnels. I had used them for years to move quickly between the HAB modules. Now, they were my path to war. A blare of an internal alarm cut through the air. I had bypassed a security checkpoint on the main deck. A magnetic lock slammed shut in the corridor behind me. I was officially a fugitive. Stellan knew. He would be coming. I ran, my breath tearing in my lungs. I burst out of a utility panel into the corridor leading to the docking ring. The airlock that connected Perseverance Point to the Messenger was 30 yards away. It felt like a mile. Before I took that final walk, I stopped. I stood in the corridor, the alarms a distant, unimportant noise. I looked down at my hands. A doctor's hands, trained to diagnose, to suture, to heal. I saw the scars from 100 nicks and cuts, the calluses from a lifetime of careful work. An oath, taken in a sunlit room on a green world, echoed in my memory. Do no harm. I closed my hands into fists. The oath shattered, its pieces falling away into silence. I was no longer Anselm Kirk, Maryland. He was a good man and he was gone. I was just a father, and my daughter was on the other side of that door. I hit the emergency release on the airlock, and the thick metal door slid open. I stepped through, and the universe changed. The air on the Messenger was still, and tasted of charged particles and something sweet and biological, like rotting fruit. The corridor before me wasn't right. The angles were suggestive, not fixed. This place was not just a vehicle, it was an organ, and it was deeply unwell. A figure emerged from a side passage, one of Locke's crew. He was humming, a tuneless, childlike melody. He saw me, and his humming stopped. He looked at the bone saw in my hand with mild interest. Another test, he murmured, a smile playing on his lips. The dream is presenting me with a symbol of violence now. It wants me to react. He took a step toward me, his hands open and non-threatening. I raised the saw. The motion was clumsy. The tool felt ridiculous in my hand, a butcher's implement in a surgeon's grip. It was a prop from a nightmare I had cast myself in, a desperate symbol for a man who didn't know the first thing about a fight. I let it fall. It clanged against the deck, a loud, stupid sound in the quiet madness. The crewman just kept smiling, waiting for the next scene to play out. I didn't have a script. I just had a purpose. I lunged forward and drove my shoulder into his chest, slamming him back against the bulkhead. His head connected with the metal. He slid to the floor, unconscious. I didn't look back. The path to the medbay was a journey through a diseased mindscape. A light panel on the ceiling showed a swirling starfield where there should have been white light. A door I passed was filmed with a thin, oily condensation that formed and dissolved in the shape of a human face. It was in the ship's mess hall that I found it. The end point. The answer to the question Ephraim Locke had asked the universe. The source of the smell, the sweet, cloying scent, was here. A man was sitting in a chair facing a blank monitor. From his chest came a contented sighing. His form, however, was in a state of catastrophic collapse. His features were melting like hot wax, his jawline flowing into his neck. His arms had shortened, pooling into his lap. He was a mound of twitching, living tissue, still breathing, still wearing the remnants of a uniform but with no recognizable human structure left. A body without a blueprint. I, the physician, catalogued the horror. Total schema collapse. The mind had so thoroughly rejected its physical form that the body had simply forgotten how to be a body. I felt a nausea so profound it almost brought me to my knees. This was Ephraim's ascension. This was a hell beyond any I could have imagined. The medbay door was unlocked. Ephraim Locke was inside, standing before a chrome locker, waiting for me. He looked from me to the monitor on the wall, which showed a live feed of the dissolving crewmen in the mess. "He is free," Ephraim whispered, his voice resonating with a terrifying, holy conviction. "He has shed the last of the dream flesh. He has awakened to the truth. Don't you see the beauty of it, Doctor? The sublime peace." I stared at the monster of calm reason before me. He wasn't trying to kill me. He was trying to convert me. "The medicine, Locke," I said, my voice a dead thing. "Ah, yes. The final prop," he said, gesturing to the locker behind him. "The ultimate temptation. Take it. Prove to yourself that the illusion is more comforting than the truth. Take it, and you anchor us all here, in this dying dream, forever." He stood aside, offering no resistance. He just watched me, his eyes full of a vast, unbreachable pity. His words were a scalpel, trying to cut the last sane nerve in my head. He was trying to make my act of love a damnable sin. I didn't have any words left to fight back with. I just had my hands. I crossed the space between us in 2 strides. He didn't even raise a hand to defend himself. He just smiled his serene, knowing smile. I hit him. My fist, a clumsy instrument of rage, connected with his jaw. It was a messy, brutal impact. He crumpled to the deck, not with the grace of a prophet, but with the simple, undignified physics of a body struck by a heavy object. I tore open the locker. Vials of the xenobiotic neutralizer were clipped inside, their contents a clear, unassuming liquid. I grabbed a handful and fled. I ran through the breathing corridors, past the glitching lights, past the unconscious crewmen, through the tortured airlock, and back into my own reality. Back in the infirmary, the ghost of the physician returned. I prepped a syringe. I found the port in Paloma's arm and pushed the plunger. The cure, the miracle, flowed into her veins. Then I just stood there, watching, the silence of the room a roaring in my ears. The minutes stretched. The peaks on her heart monitor began to soften. The rasp in her breath eased, replaced by a slow, even rhythm. Colour, a faint tide of pink, returned to her cheeks. Her eyes fluttered open. She looked at me. Not at the father who had read her stories of Earth, who had held her hand through fevers and nightmares. She looked at the man standing over her bed, at the fresh blood on his knuckles and the new, hard emptiness in his face. I saw it. A flash of something new in her eyes, something that had never been there before. Not love, not relief, fear. Stellan Steiner found me there hours later, standing over Paloma's sleeping form. She was breathing, deeply, evenly. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. I didn't try to hide the blood on my knuckles. Steiner didn't look at it. He looked at Paloma, then at the diagnostic monitor displaying a perfectly stable, blessedly boring sine wave. "The structural glitches have stopped," he said. It wasn't an accusation or a question. It was a report. "Good," I replied. He was quiet for a long moment, the two of us, two fathers who had stood on opposite sides of an impossible choice. "The ship," he finally said. "The crew. What's their status?" "The captain is unconscious. The rest, they're gone. The syndrome." I didn't have the words for the melted man in the mess hall. Steiner nodded. "We can't keep them here. Their presence, it's poison." He didn't need to see what I saw to know the truth of it. He had seen the warped beam, the sweating walls. "We'll power up their main drive remotely, put the ship on autopilot and point it back the way it came." He was giving a man a death sentence. He was also giving me a pardon. It was the portent way, a brutal, pragmatic calculus for survival. I simply nodded. We never spoke of it again. That was 3 months ago. Paloma is healthy. The red dust of the plains no longer clings to her lungs. It's just something she tracks into the hab on her boots. I see her running in the main concourse with the other children. her laughter a sound I thought I'd never hear again. I watched them play a game near the overlook, their small forms darting around the massive beam that still bears a nauseating ripple in its surface, a permanent scar on our home, a memorial to a nightmare. She doesn't talk about that night. We never do. But the space between us is different. I am still her father, the man who fixes her scraped knees and tells her when the UV cycle is about to end. But when my hands, the same hands that held a bone saw and struck a man's face, touch her, she grows still. She doesn't flinch, not anymore. It's a quietness, a watchfulness. She looks at me sometimes, her head tilted, as if trying to solve a puzzle. She is trying to reconcile the man who taught her the constellations with the monster who came back from the dead ship. I still work. I am the colony's only doctor. The work is a penance. Every suture I stitch, every fever I break is an attempt to balance a scale that can never be balanced. I got what I wanted. I paid the price. My victory is a quiet room with a ghost in it. Sometimes in the deep cycle darkness of the Hab, I think of Ephraim Locke. I see his serene, pitying eyes as he hurtled back into the infinite, chaotic void he worshipped. He believed reality was a lie and was willing to let a child die for that truth. I believed my child's life was the only truth and was willing to become a killer for it. We were both prophets of a single, unshakable faith. Two men made monsters by the conviction that we were right. At night, I stand at the overlook window, the one that looks out on the Needles. I stare up at the purple, arrhythmic sky. Another FTL supply ship is due in 8 standard months. It will trace the same path through the void, tearing open the same unhealed wound in space-time. I watch the empty patch of stars where it will one day appear, and I don't feel hope. I feel a quiet dread, and I wonder what new kind of salvation, what new kind of damnation it will carry with it when it arrives.